Hello and welcome to this edition of the Killgerm podcast. Once again, we're recording remotely amid the new lockdown imposed for January 2021. And joining me today over the phone is Helen Ainsworth, who is the Key Account Manager for BASF. Helen's been in the industry for 21 years and has helped bring Selontra to market, the new high-performance, non-anticoagulant rodenticide from BASF. Thank you for joining me today, Helen. What actually is the active ingredient in Selontra?
The active ingredient is cholecalciferol, and it's at 750 parts per million. Cholecalciferol isn't an anticoagulant, so it has a different mode of action. So where anticoagulants affect the blood clotting capabilities, cholecalciferol causes hyperglycemia. So the main benefit of that in terms of movement and restriction is that within 24 hours of the rodents eating it, they stop moving about because they get this hyperglycemia and deposits of calcium, which affects the stomach and the joints. So given that, then, is this product just for professional use, or is it available for amateur use as well? No, it hasn't got amateur authorization, and I don't think it will ever have amateur authorization. It's professional use only, which means that you do have to have demonstrated competence, so under the crew. So, currently you can do the one-day course, or you can hold the RSPH level 2 or BPCA part 1 and all those qualifications. So you still have to have that, but we've also asked that people go on the Selontra training platform. So we set up a website because it's such a different mode of action, and it uses a different baiting technique called speed baiting. We wanted people to understand how it works, because a lot of people in the industry won't remember when calciferol was around. So we want to make sure that they understand how to use that correctly and they get the best and the most out of the product. So Killgerm are asking that when you place an order, you send in your copy of your certificate. And it's a free course, it doesn't cost anything. You literally go online, log in, and it takes about 30 minutes, and there's a test at the end, and you have to pass that test with 70%. So it's quite good, there's not many things in life that you get free training for. And it's also registered for CPD points.
Yeah, I suppose it'll be quite reassuring for the customer as well, knowing that the pest controller that's sort of using these rodenticides has had proper training. You know for a fact that when they're using Selontra, they are fully trained in using it. And when it comes to rodenticides and insecticides as well, anything in pest control that can be quite dangerous with the active ingredients and things like that, it must be reassuring to know that what is being done for you, this service that you're being provided, is definitely being done right because of the training that they've been provided with.
Yeah, and the only reason it came about really was when Goliath was launched many years ago, and that's got fipronil in it. That was a game changer. And there was a thing then when the first users of Goliath had to do an online training to understand that the dots that you put down with Goliath had to be so small because of the cascade effect. So on the back of that, we thought, well, why not let's do a Cilantro one? It's a game changer. It's a different baiting style. It's a different active ingredient. And when you look at the rodenticide market, it is dominated by anticoagulants.
So where is Selontra actually suitable for use then?
So the authorization is in and around buildings, so in bait boxes or protected baits. But because of this stop feeding effect it has and this stop movement effect, so the rodents eat it on the first night or the second night, and then they'll not move then, and they'll go back to the harborages and die. And because you're getting that almost immediately, it means that you're not having the movement of rats. So if you've got highly sensitive areas or sites where you're going to have contamination issues or damage to buildings and all that sort of stuff, it's great. So if we look at other countries that it's been launched in, so it's been out in Australia and America for some time now, and in Australia we got an emergency permit for the pig sector because of the spread of disease. So, in livestock it's great, but places like kindergartens, schools, hospitals, any high risk or high profile site where you don't want rats walking around, it's great because you're not having to wait 4 to 5 days for the rodents to stop moving, which is what you would get with an anticoagulant.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the palatability, which is obviously a key factor in any rodenticide, how does it compare to alternatives? And I don't mean they're necessarily the actual rodenticides, but You've said there it's been used in farming and stuff, like the
Yeah.
alternatives that are on that farm, so the grain that the rats will be getting into. How does it compare to that? Why would they opt to go for the Selontra?
Cilantro has been in development for a very long time, and some people might already know Sharon Hughes. And Sharon has designed this bait formulation, and she's got a hell of a lot of experience with bait types. And the thing with cholecalciferol, and a lot of people have had a look at cholecalciferol, but getting that bait to get the rodents to eat enough in one sitting is really crucial. So Sharon has tweaked it and done all sorts with it to get the best formulation. And she's done it alongside things like maize silage, and it's come out more palatable. She's done it alongside things like beef burgers, and it's come out more palatable. She's done it alongside anticoagulant blocks and paste formulations that we've already got, and it's come out more palatable. And the palatability is key, really, to the formulation. And I think people forget that people look at active ingredients and think of difenychum and bromadiolone and now cholecalciferol and difenychum and fluclomiphene. They look at these active ingredients, but they don't actually look at the product formulations. If you look at the amount of bromadiolone baits out there, it's like going into a shop and looking at a range of chocolate bars, but we all have our preferences, and rodents are exactly the same, and they will change their mind as well. And so it's trying to give them everything that they want to keep them there, to get them to feed.
Okay, so how does Cilantro actually benefit the pest controller?
In terms of a pest controller, in so many ways. So the baiting schedule for the Cilantro, we say, is 7-2-7. So you go on the first day, you put your 7 blocks down for rats. You go back on day 2, you top it up, and you go back in 7 days, and that's it. So in terms of visits, you're reducing your time. People forget that when they do a visit, when they leave their house, there is a cost to that job that they do, and that includes the cost of their van, the insurance, the wear and tear on the vehicle.
Yeah, I think with that 7-2-7 thing that you were speaking about then as well, because there's fixed time schedule and they know when they're going to have to go back to that site, then they can fit other things in around it and plan ahead of time, because there is going to be other jobs on and things like that, and you're not going to get unexpected calls back to there because you know exactly when you're going to have to go back and give that box the service.
Yeah, and I think people forget that, Celantra's, we're saying that you can achieve control in 7 days. With an anticoagulant, you're looking at 21 easily.
Hmm.
In the Hampshire case study that we shared on our launch event, that was 18 days for 2,000 rats, and that's just incomprehensible, really.
Yeah.
When I've done some really big rat jobs in my time as a tech and as a biologist, and to achieve 18 control in 18 days is just like pie in the sky kind of figures. Even if you were trapping, you'd have to be there every day, and the cost of that labour intensiveness is, it's just not worth thinking about. And not a lot of people have that time and commitment. If you're a small one-man band, or it's local to, if it's in the same area where you live, then yes, you can call every day. But if it's not, then no. And if you've got things like some of the different manufacturing specifications expect you to be on site every other day until you've got clear visits. With anticoagulants, that can, I've had sites in the past where I've been going every day for nearly a month, or sometimes 2 months, because you get one infestation, then another one would pop up, and you're trying to close off the other one. But it's fascinating and interesting to speak to different pest controllers, those that have started to use Selontra, they're loving it. I spoke to someone at the back end of last year who'd only discovered pulse baiting for the first time, and he's been a pest controller for 10 years. And he's only started pulse baiting because of the restrictions with COVID, because he thought he'd have less visits to do. But Selontra in a COVID situation is great.
Well, like you say, the cost, the labour cost of going and visiting a site constantly, if you were to properly sit down and work it out, it's going to be ridiculous, and it's probably going to end up losing money if it's not done right for the money that the controller, the company is bringing in. There'd be a point, I think, where you were saying sort of, is it worth it? Purely from a financial point of view, but with Selontra, that's not going to be a concern, because you know how many visits you're making and when, and you could, like I say, you can plan around that.
Yeah, you can schedule it in your diary. We've all had diaries. We've all been there. We've all had our revisits marked in the diary. No matter what happens, you have to do those revisits on those days, or either side of that day, to satisfy the client. And there'll be people out there like myself that have been to meetings with clients and terminated clients because they're not going to do the recommendations. And you have more revisits from routines, and you're in negative equity for the contract or for the job. Usually with contracts and big sites where they just won't do the issues. Now, you're always going to have some issues there, but at least with Cilantro, that once they start eating it, they're not going to be moving around.
So how does Cilantro benefit the end customer then, the actual business who's paying the pest controller?
So from the business's perspective, there's multiple things. So they're using a product that hasn't got any known resistance and can't have any known resistance. They're going to have less visits. So if it's a biosecurity issue, you've got less people on site. That's also a health and safety issue, because you're only going to have probably 3 to 4 visits. Then you'd think of your 727 rule. So as a business, as a contractor, your contractor is doing the best that he can. They're always looking at, are they restricting the movement? Are they eradication sources of food and water? And it amazes me that some people forget those basic things and they just go straight in with rodenticide without thinking of traps. And that's why Selontra is professional use, and we've put this training thing in, because not only did we want to recap people on the basics of pest control, but we also wanted them to think differently and to understand it, because it's not the cheapest product on the market by any stretch of the imagination. But the money savings are massive, and the time savings.
So following on from that then, to get the best out of the product in a financial sense as well, you need to maximise the effect of the product. So how do you do that with Selontra? How do you maximise the effect that it has?
So first off, you need to make sure you've done a good site survey and you know what you're dealing with. That's just bread and butter basics. For any pest controller, you don't turn up on site and you don't put boxes or baits down straight away without having a good look round. And I've done quite a lot of troubleshooting over the years. And one of the things that I always did before I went to any site was I used to Google Earth it. And I remember having a phone conversation with one guy about he had a rat infestation. And I said to him, but do you know what neighbouring properties are? I went, no. I said, well, I've just Googled it while I'm on the phone to you, and there's a waste transfer station 2 doors down. So, site survey's key to any treatment. Get an idea of what you're dealing with, so you make sure that you put enough baits down. You follow the label, you put enough baits down to the labelled recommendations, and you make sure you put the maximum amount of bait in those bait points as possible. So for rats, it'll be 7 blocks every 5 to 10 metres. And then you go back on day 2, you check it, you top it all up, and then you go back on day 7. And I think that's key. But it's like anything, you have to plan your time. You wouldn't go out and do a netting job in high winds and torrential rain. Some people might, but it wouldn't be the best thing to do if you're working at heights, to be out in bad weather. You wouldn't do a gassing job with aluminium phosphide on a wet day. So it's all about planning your time and looking at your diaries.
So following on from that then, where can you bait then, and how would you bait it with Selontra?
So it's in and around buildings, like I've already said, but not in burrows. So we don't have burrow baiting on the label, but you can use protective baits, so you can use natural materials that are around site to protect the bait. And it's also got permanent baiting. So as I was saying before, if you've got a site where you've got neighbours where there's a high potential for reinvasion, then you can use a permanent baiting strategy under an IPM, as long as you look at your risk assessments for reinfestation and obviously review it on a regular basis, which is really quite good actually to have that option, because there are sites out there that do need permanent baiting.
Yeah, I think with things like this, the versatility is key. If you can do as many things as possible with the product, then it gives you more scope to sort of be a bit creative with dealing with the problem.
Yeah, and the permanent baiting thing, we've not had it on some of our products, and we've been criticised for it, but we have got it on Selontra. I think people have to also remember that whenever you've got a rodenticide down, just because it says permanent baiting on the label, doesn't mean that you can almost abandon it. You're still responsible for that bait, and you still have to revisit it and check on it. But then that's up to the technician or who's managing that site to make that decision based on their risk assessments and the infestation level on that site.
That's brilliant. Thank you for joining me today, Helen. I think it's really important to shine a light on some of the new products and new things that are going on in the market, just to sort of raise a bit of awareness and alert people that there is new ways of doing things and there is new products to use that will improve your service. And I think you've certainly done that today. So yeah, thank you, Helen. The code you'll need to redeem your basis prompt CPD points is SB-HA-0121. For full instructions on how to claim those points and the BPCA CPD points, head to either of the first two Killgerm podcasts where I explain in full. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.